Mark Ramirez had always loved the night sky. He was not a professional astronomer, but his fascination with stars, planets, and distant galaxies had been a part of him since childhood. Ever since he could remember, he spent countless nights staring through his small telescope in his backyard, trying to trace constellations and capture meteors with his camera. On this particular evening, he decided to take a break from his small backyard and drive out to the desert, where the sky stretched endlessly, free from the glare of city lights. The desert had always held a mysterious charm for him, the way the sand stretched endlessly under the moonlight, the quiet that seemed to hum softly, and the feeling that, somehow, anything could happen out there. He drove 4 hours along winding roads, the hum of his old pickup truck blending with the faint whistle of the wind through the cacti. The night was cool, and the air smelled faintly of dry earth and sage. Mark felt alive in a way he rarely did in the city, where life was full of noise, obligations, and distractions. Out here, under the endless sky, he could think clearly, breathe deeply, and feel a part of something much larger than himself. He had packed his telescope, a couple of notebooks, and a camera, planning to spend the night photographing the stars and jotting down observations. It was meant to be a quiet night for stargazing, but it was going to become something he would never forget. As he drove deeper into the desert, his headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating stretches of sand and scattered rocks. The road curved sharply around a small hill, and for a moment, he thought he saw a strange glimmer in the distance. At first, he dismissed it as a reflection from a piece of metal or glass, maybe a sign or an abandoned vehicle. But as he got closer, the glow seemed steady, too bright to be anything ordinary. It shimmered like a lantern, but with colors he had never seen before, soft blues, purples, and silvers that seemed to dance in the air. Mark slowed his truck to a crawl, curiosity pushing him forward. His heart began to race not out of fear, but out of excitement. He was used to observing the unusual in the sky, but this felt different. The glow seemed to have a presence, a strange energy that drew him in. He parked the truck a short distance away, leaving the engine running, and stepped out into the cool desert night. The ground was firm under his boots, the sand crunching softly as he walked toward the light. The desert around him was silent except for the occasional whisper of the wind. His eyes were wide, scanning the horizon, trying to figure out what he was seeing, and then, he saw her dot at first. He thought she must be someone dressed in a reflective outfit, maybe a performer or a traveler with a campfire. But as he came closer, he realized she was not human in any familiar sense. She was tall, graceful, and her skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, casting a soft luminescent sheen across her body. The color of her skin was unlike anything Mark had ever seen, soft shades of blue and silver that shifted subtly as she moved. Her hair flowed around her shoulders like liquid light, shimmering faintly in the darkness. But it was her eyes that stopped him completely. They were large and wide, the irises sparkling in a way that seemed almost alive, reflecting the starlight as if they held galaxies within them. Mark froze in place, unsure if he should step closer or turn back. His mind raced, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Could this be some kind of costume or advanced human technology? Know something about her presence, the way the air seemed to shimmer slightly around her, made him realize that this was no ordinary person. And yet, despite the strangeness, there was something calming about her. She did not appear threatening. She stood silently, watching him as intently as he was watching her, and in that moment, a strange sense of connection passed between them. After a moment of hesitation, Mark spoke, his voice low and careful. "Hello, are you okay?" He did not know why he said it. Part of him wanted to communicate, to make sense of the impossible situation. The figure tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Mark noticed that she did not speak in any language he recognized, nor did she make a sound that could be called speaking. Instead, she emitted a soft harmonic tone, like a note from a musical instrument. The sound was calming and strange at the same time, and Mark felt his tension ease slightly. He took a small step closer, his curiosity overcoming his caution. I don't mean to intrude. I'm just..." He stopped, realizing that words might be useless in this moment. All he could do was look at her, trying to understand what she was, who she was. The air between them felt charged, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Mark noticed that the light around her shifted slightly in response to his presence, glowing a little brighter as if acknowledging him. Unable to resist, and driven by a sudden impulse, Mark said something he did not fully think through. "You have amazing eyes." The words hung in the desert air. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, the figure's reaction took him completely by surprise. Her eyes widened slightly, and a soft pulsating glow spread across her face and body. It was not anger or fear, but something else, something curious, almost like delight. The colors around her shimmered and changed, swirling in patterns Mark could barely comprehend. He realized, almost instinctively, that she was communicating through the lights, expressing emotions in a way humans did not normally experience. Mark took a step back, astonished. He had expected fear, maybe confusion, but not the unmistakable, joyful reaction to his simple words. She reached out slightly, her hands delicate and glowing faintly, as if inviting him to move closer. Mark's mind raced. Was this a test? A form of greeting? He could not understand her language, but the emotion was clear gratitude, curiosity, and trust. In that moment, Mark felt a strange sense of relief. The desert night, the stars above, and this glowing figure created a moment so surreal that he was no longer afraid. He felt as though he had stepped into a story far larger than himself. He noticed the way the wind seemed to interact with her presence, carrying the shimmering glow slightly like a halo. He also realized that every movement she made seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial, yet gentle. Mark wondered what she had seen, what brought her here, and whether he was the first human she had ever encountered. As he stood there, he tried to memorize every detail: the curve of her shoulders, the way her skin seemed to ripple in the light, the extraordinary brilliance of her eyes. He knew, deep down, that this moment would remain with him forever, no matter what happened next. For what felt like hours, but could have been only minutes, they simply observed each other. The desert around them seemed to recede into silence, leaving only the two of them in a strange/shared space between reality and something far beyond human understanding. Mark realized that this encounter was not just about fear or surprise. It was about connection, recognition, and wonder. The words he had spoken, a simple compliment, had bridged the gap between two worlds. However briefly, finally, the figure moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging his presence fully. Mark felt an almost magnetic pull to her, an urge to communicate further, but he also sensed that he needed to be patient. Whatever this was, it was extraordinary, and rushing it might destroy the fragile trust that had formed. He adjusted his stance, careful not to startle her, and simply waited, letting the desert night carry the weight of possibility around them. In the quiet of the desert, under the endless stars, Mark Ramirez realized that his life had changed in an instant. The impossible had appeared before him, and in that encounter, he glimpsed a universe larger and more mysterious than he had ever imagined. And it all began with a single moment of honesty, a simple human word, and the courage to speak it aloud. Mark Ramirez felt a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. His heart was still racing from the surreal encounter in the desert. He had never imagined that something like this could happen in his life. The glowing figure before him had reacted to his words in a way that no human ever could. Her eyes, wide and shimmering, had seemed to respond directly to his compliment, communicating something he could not fully understand, but something deeply positive. He realized that this moment was unlike anything he had experienced, and yet he did not feel fear. Instead, there was curiosity, wonder, and a strong urge to understand. For a few moments, Mark simply stood there, unsure whether to move closer or keep his distance. The desert was quiet, the soft wind brushing against his face, and the stars above twinkled as if they were watching the scene unfold. The figure remained still, her glowing skin reflecting the moonlight in soft, ever-changing shades. He noticed now that her movements were slow, deliberate, and graceful, almost like she was floating slightly above the ground. The air around her seemed to shimmer faintly, as if even the space itself responded to her presence. Finally, Mark took a cautious step forward. I didn't mean to startle you, he said quietly. I've never seen anything like you before. I didn't know what else to say. His voice was shaky, but sincere. He wanted to communicate, to bridge the gap between them, but he realized how limited words could be in this situation. He tried to think of what to say next, but the words felt small compared to the reality before him. She tilted her head slightly, and the glow around her brightened, like a soft, warm acknowledgement. Mark realized that this was a form of communication he did not yet understand. Her reactions were immediate, emotional, and vivid, far beyond anything he could express with words alone. The glowing patterns on her skin shifted and swirled, creating shapes and colors that seemed to carry meaning. He stared in awe, trying to interpret the signals. It was as if she was saying, "You are welcome. I understand your kindness. I am curious about you." Though he could not hear words, he could feel the intention behind them. Feeling a sudden urge to interact more directly, Mark slowly extended his hand, palm open, as if offering a gesture of friendship. He noticed that she mirrored the motion slightly, though she did not touch him. The colors around her shifted in a gentle wave, pulsing outward. Mark realized that even small gestures mattered here. Every movement, every intention, seemed amplified and interpreted in ways he could only begin to imagine. The desert, the night sky, and the glowing figure all felt connected in that moment. As if he had entered a completely new world of perception, Mark decided to take a few steps closer, careful not to rush or scare her. "I'm Mark," he said softly. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I just want to communicate, if that's possible." The figure seemed to respond immediately. Her eyes glowed brighter, and the patterns on her skin shifted into shapes that resembled symbols, though unlike any symbols Mark had ever seen. He could not decipher them, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. There was openness, curiosity, and an almost playful acknowledgement, as if she appreciated his effort. He smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the desert temperature. "I know this might sound strange, but I've always loved the stars," he said, glancing up at the sky. "I spend nights watching them, trying to understand the universe. And tonight, I think the universe is showing me something I never imagined." The figure moved slightly closer, tilting her head as if considering his words. The glow around her pulsed gently, faster now, in rhythm with the strange melodic tone she emitted. Mark realized that her tone, her glow, and her movements were all part of a single language, an emotional language that transcended spoken words. He decided to try something even bolder. "I don't know who you are or where you come from," he said, "but I want you to know that I mean no harm. I just want to understand." The figure responded almost immediately. Her glow brightened in a wave, and the colors shifted into what Mark instinctively understood as a form of acknowledgement. It was a strange, beautiful sensation, like seeing a language made of light and feeling its meaning directly in his chest. He could not speak her language, but somehow he felt it. For the first time in his life, Mark experienced communication that was not limited to words or sounds. It was something deeper, more immediate, and profoundly moving. As he continued to observe her, Mark noticed subtle details he had not seen before. The way her eyes reflected the stars above, the gentle ripple of her skin as the glow shifted, the way her presence seemed to influence the desert itself. Even the wind seemed to respond to her movements, carrying her soft melodic tones across the sand. Mark felt a sense of awe that went beyond curiosity. He was witnessing something entirely new, a living being whose very existence challenged his understanding of life, communication, and connection. It was as if the universe had opened a door and invited him to step through. Encouraged by the connection they had formed, Mark decided to try another small gesture. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his camera, raising it slowly. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "I just want to remember this moment." The figure did not shy away. Instead, her glow shifted into gentle arcs of light that seemed almost like a nod of consent. Mark snapped a few photos, careful not to use the flash, which might have startled her. He felt a thrill as he captured images of her radiant form, images that would later help him process the encounter, though he knew no photograph could truly capture the experience. After a while, Mark felt a subtle shift in her demeanor. She took a step closer, and her tone changed slightly, becoming more melodic and flowing. The colors around her began to swirl more actively, creating patterns that seemed like a dance in the air. Mark realized that she was initiating something, a form of interaction or ritual that he could not fully comprehend. He mirrored her movements subtly, raising his hands, shifting his stance, and trying to follow the rhythm she seemed to be creating. The desert night became a stage for this silent, glowing exchange, and Mark felt a deep sense of harmony with the moment. Time seemed to stretch and bend. Minutes or hours could have passed. Mark had no way of knowing. He was completely absorbed in the presence of this extraordinary being. The isolation of the desert, the infinite sky above, and the glow of the figure created a sense of timelessness. He felt small in comparison to the universe, yet connected in ways he had never imagined. Every flicker of color, every tone, every gesture seemed to communicate volumes. Mark realized that sometimes, understanding does not require words. Sometimes, it requires attention, presence, and a willingness to feel the other being's reality. Then, unexpectedly, the figure paused. She lowered her hands slightly and tilted her head to one side. The glowing patterns around her body became softer, more contemplative. Mark sensed a subtle change in the energy between them. It was as if she was preparing to convey something more, something important. He held his breath, uncertain what would come next, yet trusting that whatever it was, it would deepen the connection they had begun. The glow around her intensified briefly, then stabilized into a steady, warm luminescence. Mark could feel it radiating toward him, gentle yet undeniable. Mark realized that this encounter was not just about curiosity or wonder. It was about connection, an unspoken, profound connection that transcended species, language, and even worlds. His simple words had initiated something neither of them could have predicted, and yet the result was a moment of trust and mutual acknowledgement. He felt gratitude for the universe, for the chance encounter, and for the courage to speak honestly. And he understood, with a clarity he had never known, that sometimes the smallest gestures, a smile, a word, a compliment, could bridge even the greatest divides. As the night continued, Mark felt a quiet calm settle over him. The glow of the figure, the stars above, and the silence of the desert created a sense of peace and wonder that he knew would stay with him forever. He had entered a moment that was beyond explanation, beyond expectation, and beyond imagination. And he realized that this was only the beginning. Whatever else might happen, whatever mysteries remained, he had already experienced something extraordinary, a glimpse of connection that reached across the unknown. Mark Ramirez could hardly believe what was happening. For hours, though he had no sense of time in the desert, he had been standing with the glowing figure. Her presence was mesmerizing. Every movement she made, every change in the soft glow of her skin, seemed deliberate, meaningful, and filled with emotions he could barely comprehend. Mark felt like he was part of a living painting, one in which colors, light, and sound combined to communicate something far deeper than words ever could. He had always thought he understood the night sky, the planets, and the stars, but nothing had prepared him for the intelligence, the presence, and the subtle beauty of this being. Suddenly, the alien woman's eyes, already extraordinary, began to glow even more intensely. They shimmered and swirled, reflecting countless colors that Mark had never seen before. The light expanded outward from her eyes, projecting into the air above and around them. It was not a harsh light, nor was it frightening. It was beautiful, like witnessing a new aurora, one that seemed to dance and twist with a life of its own. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he realized that this reaction was unlike anything he had ever seen. It felt alive, responsive, almost as if she were expressing herself visually in a language of light. Mark stood frozen, awestruck, unsure how to respond. He had expected curiosity, perhaps a hesitant reaction, but this was something far beyond human comprehension. The swirling colors formed intricate patterns, some resembling spirals, others like flowing rivers of energy in the air. For a brief moment, Mark felt he could read them, not in words, but in emotion. Gratitude, curiosity, surprise, wonder. Each pattern carried a meaning he could feel in his chest, as if her expression was reaching out to him directly through his heart rather than his mind. Then came a sound, soft and melodic. It was a tone, sustained and flowing, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but richer and warmer. Mark had no idea how she produced it, and he was too far from science or logic to question it. He realized instinctively that the sound, like the light, was another form of communication. It was a language not made of words, but of feeling. As he listened, he felt a wave of calm, curiosity, and connection washing over him. He understood her reaction was to his words, the simple compliment he had given earlier. Somehow, those few words had moved her, reached her, and prompted this incredible display of emotion. Mark wanted to respond, to acknowledge her expression, but he realized that words were useless here. Instead, he raised his hand slowly, mirroring her posture, trying to show respect and openness. The alien woman seemed to notice. Her glowing patterns shifted again, moving in soft waves toward his direction. It was almost as if she was responding to his gesture, inviting him to participate in this silent, luminous conversation. The desert around them became a stage for this interaction, and Mark felt an almost magical energy enveloping him. Every nerve in his body seemed alive. Every glance, every flicker of light, carried meaning. For the first time, Mark felt an urge to communicate more than mere words could express. He moved slightly closer, careful not to rush, not to frighten her. I don't know if you can understand me," he said softly, "but I want you to know that I respect you. I want to learn." His voice trembled slightly, but he spoke with honesty. The alien woman tilted her head, the soft luminescent glow of her eyes intensifying. The colors above her body began to form complex geometric patterns, spirals within spirals, as if she was creating a visual language to respond to him. Though he could not understand it logically, he felt the meaning deep within him. It was appreciation, recognition, connection. Mark took a deep breath, realizing he was experiencing something beyond words or science. It was as if he had crossed into a new form of perception, one in which emotions, intentions, and understanding were communicated directly through light, movement, and sound. He had spent his life trying to understand the universe, and yet here, before him, was an intelligence and a presence that no telescope, no book, and no experiment could ever fully explain. The universe had chosen this night to teach him a lesson he could never forget. As the patterns shifted, Mark noticed that the alien woman's movements became more deliberate, almost rhythmic. It was as if she were performing a dance, a ritual of communication. Every step, every tilt of her head, every shift of her glowing skin formed part of a conversation he could feel rather than hear. Mark instinctively mirrored her movements, small gestures, slow shifts of his hands and arms, attempting to participate in this luminous dialogue. With each gesture, the glow and patterns responded, almost like a mirror reflecting his attention and effort. The desert, silent and vast, held this private interaction between them, stretching time into a sense of infinity. Mark wondered what had brought her to Earth. Was she an explorer, a scientist, a traveler? Could she understand human culture at all? Even more importantly, he wondered why she had reacted so strongly to his compliment. In human terms, words could carry meaning, but her reaction transcended words entirely. His simple statement about her eyes, mere words from a human head, sparked a response that seemed to convey gratitude, curiosity, and trust all at once. Mark realized he was witnessing a cultural exchange on a scale far beyond human understanding. And yet, it was simple. It was based on honesty and openness. The raw, unfiltered communication of emotion. The desert night grew cooler, though Mark barely noticed. His attention was entirely on her, on the shifting patterns of light, the melodic tones, and the connection forming between them. He felt something he had never experienced before, sense of being truly seen, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, in a way that transcended words. He realized that the alien woman, with all her grace and otherworldly presence, was capable of perceiving sincerity, intention, and feeling on a level that humans rarely experienced with one another. And now, she was sharing that perception with him. Mark decided to take another step, not physically, but emotionally. He focused on his own feelings, honesty, curiosity, and openness, and tried to send them outward, not as words, but as intention. He imagined the desert, the night sky, and the glowing figure as part of a single system of energy. He breathed slowly, letting his emotions radiate outward, hoping that she could perceive them. Almost immediately, the patterns of her glow shifted again. The swirls of color became warmer, softer, more intricate. Mark could feel the acknowledgement and appreciation of his effort. He realized that this was a kind of conversation, not of words, but of emotion, intention, and energy. As the interaction continued, Mark began to notice small, subtle signals in her behavior. The way she shifted her weight, the slight motion of her hands, the rhythm of her glowing pulses all seemed meaningful. Each gesture added nuance to the conversation, and he felt himself learning, slowly, to interpret the language of light and sound. He realized that this was more than an encounter, it was a lesson in perception, connection, and trust. The universe, it seemed, was teaching him something essential, that true communication went beyond words, beyond culture, beyond species, and even beyond planets. Time passed in a strange, elastic way. Minutes could have been hours could have been minutes. The desert, the stars, and the glowing figure formed a timeless world where nothing else mattered. Mark felt a profound sense of humility, wonder, and gratitude. He was experiencing an intelligence so alien, so extraordinary, yet also profoundly relatable, because it responded to honesty, respect, and curiosity. He understood that this encounter was not simply about seeing or observing. It was about participating in a shared moment of connection, a dialogue of energy, emotion, and presence. Finally, the alien woman paused. Her glow softened into a steady, gentle radiance, and the melodic tone faded into a delicate hum. Mark felt a calm, almost meditative energy envelop him. He realized that she had acknowledged him fully, accepted his presence, and allowed him to participate in her world for a brief, extraordinary moment. He felt a quiet joy, a sense of accomplishment not in a human sense of achievement, but in the recognition of connection. For the first time, he felt he had touched something beyond himself, something infinite, beautiful, and alive. Mark smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. The desert night, the stars above, and the glowing figure before him had transformed a simple night of stargazing into an experience that would stay with him forever. He had crossed a threshold, entering a moment of understanding and connection that few humans would ever know, and he knew, with certainty, that this was only the beginning. Whatever else might come, whatever mysteries remained, he had already witnessed something miraculous, a language of light, emotion, and trust, sparked by a single honest word and an open heart. Mark Ramirez stood quietly in the desert, feeling the lingering glow of the alien woman's presence. The air was calm, the stars stretched endlessly above, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. He could still feel the residual warmth of the light patterns she had shared, as if the desert itself remembered the conversation they had just shared. Every movement she had made, every soft tone, had left an impression on him. He was no longer just an observer, he was part of something extraordinary, a connection that felt alive and real, even though it defied everything he had ever known about life on Earth. As he watched, the alien woman moved with a gentle fluidity, stepping slightly closer. Her glow pulsed softly in response to his presence, and the light patterns shifted again, more intricate this time. It was clear she wanted to communicate further, though the language she used was still beyond human words. Mark realized he needed to be patient, to let her guide the interaction. He mirrored her movements subtly, moving his hands and arms slowly, trying to match the rhythm she seemed to create. Each shift in her glow seemed to respond directly to his actions. The desert around them felt suspended in time, a space where only the two of them existed. Mark's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Was she alone? Or was there a larger group like her somewhere? And yet, he knew that asking these questions out loud would not help. She did not understand language the way humans did. What mattered was presence, sincerity, and attention. He focused on his emotions, trying to convey openness, respect, and curiosity. He wanted her to know that he meant no harm, that he wanted only to understand and connect. As he concentrated, he felt a subtle response. The light patterns around her swirled in gentle waves, soft blues and silvers merging and separating as if in acknowledgement. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien woman extended her hand slightly toward him. Her glowing fingers shimmered in the moonlight, and the air around them seemed to vibrate softly. Mark froze for a moment, unsure whether to reach back. He realized that this gesture was not just physical, it was symbolic. It was an invitation, a sign of trust, a bridge between their worlds. Taking a deep breath, he slowly raised his hand, careful not to rush or startle her. As his fingertips approached hers, the glow of her skin shifted, radiating outward in a delicate, almost musical pattern. Mark felt a wave of warmth and connection that made his heart pound. When their hands finally touched, though lightly, almost reverently, Mark felt an energy he could not describe. It was like a current flowing through him, connecting him to her in a way that transcended words. The colors around her intensified, spiraling and flowing in patterns that seemed to communicate emotions directly into his chest. He felt gratitude, trust, and curiosity all intertwined. It was as if she was showing him that this brief contact was a shared understanding, a silent promise of respect and mutual recognition. Mark realized that the simplest gesture, a human touch, carefully offered, had become a profound exchange across worlds. As they stood together, a soft hum emanated from her. It was different this time, not melodic, but steady and calming, like the vibration of a deep, unseen resonance. Mark felt the hum in his chest, in his bones, almost as if it were a language of energy. He instinctively responded, closing his eyes and focusing on his own breathing, matching the rhythm he felt in her hum. Slowly, the patterns of light above and around her began to change, forming shapes that reminded him of constellations. It was as if she was sharing her own perspective of the universe with him, inviting him to see and feel it as she did. Mark opened his eyes, mesmerized. He had spent countless nights staring at stars through telescopes, charting constellations, and studying planets, but none of it compared to what he was witnessing now. The patterns she created were alive, dynamic, and meaningful. He could feel the story of her world, the flow of her thoughts, and the depth of her awareness, all without a single word being spoken. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and humbling. He realized that he had glimpsed a consciousness that was far older, far wiser, and far more expansive than any human mind could comprehend. He wanted to communicate something in return, to show her that he understood, even in a small way. Slowly, he lifted his hands and traced a circle in the air, mimicking the movement of one of the light patterns. Almost immediately, she responded, the glow of her skin rippling in waves that matched his gesture. It was a silent conversation, a dance of intention and emotion. Mark felt joy, connection, and curiosity all at once. He realized that he was learning her language, not words, not grammar, not syntax, but pure expression. Every motion, every glow, every vibration carried meaning. The night stretched on, but Mark lost all sense of time. He was completely absorbed in this exchange, feeling as if he had been transported to a different reality. Yet despite the strangeness, there was a warmth, a familiarity in the connection. He felt seen, understood, and accepted. And for the first time in his life, he experienced a type of communication that went beyond language, beyond culture, and even beyond species. He understood that this was not just an encounter, it was a lesson in trust, empathy, and connection. And it had been initiated by something as simple as a sincere compliment. Then, gradually, the alien woman's glow shifted again. The colors became softer, warmer, and more subtle. She stepped slightly back, breaking the physical contact but not the connection. Mark felt a sense of bittersweet emotion, joy for the shared experience, but also the awareness that this moment might be fleeting. She tilted her head toward him, and the soft hum returned, steady and calm. He felt that she was communicating something important, though he could not understand it completely. It was as if she was saying, "You have shown openness, honesty, and kindness. That is enough for now." Mark nodded slowly, even though he knew she could not see the gesture as humans would. He felt gratitude and humility swell inside him. He realized that the encounter had already changed him. He had experienced a connection that transcended everything he had known, and he understood that life could be far stranger, far more beautiful, and far more mysterious than he had ever imagined. The desert around them seemed to reflect this understanding. The sand glowing faintly in the moonlight, the wind carrying the soft hum of energy, and the stars above, twinkling like witnesses to this extraordinary event. He decided to explore another form of communication. He pulled a small notebook from his backpack and began to draw patterns in the sand. Inspired by the shapes of light she had created, lines, spirals, and circles emerged under his fingertips. Simple forms meant to convey intention and curiosity. Almost immediately, she responded by creating corresponding patterns in her glowing display. The interaction became a rhythm, a mutual exchange of symbols and shapes. Mark realized that even though he could not understand her fully, he could participate in a dialogue through creativity, movement, and attention. Each gesture, each pattern, strengthened the invisible bond between them. Hours or perhaps minutes passed in this shared exploration. Mark felt a profound sense of harmony. The alien woman's presence no longer felt strange or intimidating. Instead, it felt familiar in a way that transcended familiarity, was a sense of understanding and acceptance that reached deep into his heart. He realized that their connection had become a bridge, a way of knowing and sharing without needing words. The universe, in its infinite complexity, had allowed this encounter, and he felt honored to be part of it. Finally, the alien woman paused completely. Her glow softened into a gentle, steady radiance, and her hands came to rest at her sides. Mark sensed a subtle message in the stillness. The moment of active exchange had reached a pause, a quiet reflection. He felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, awe, and quiet joy wash over him. He knew that the connection they had formed was real, profound, and lasting, even if the encounter itself might be brief. Mark took a deep breath, letting the silence of the desert and the warmth of her glow fill him. He understood that this was not the end, but a beginning. He had been part of something extraordinary, something beyond words, beyond reason, and beyond imagination. The alien woman had shown him a new way of perceiving the world, a way of connecting that transcended language, species, and even planets. And he knew, with certainty, that he would carry this understanding with him forever. Mark Ramirez felt a quiet stillness settle over the desert. The alien woman's glow, once vibrant and swirling, had softened into a steady, gentle light. The moment felt sacred, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Watching this extraordinary encounter, Mark had been standing in the desert for what felt like hours, though he had lost all sense of time. He knew this connection might be fleeting, but he also understood that it had already changed him forever. Every shift of her glow, every soft tone she had made, every gesture of her graceful hands had left an imprint on him, a memory not just of sight and sound, but of feeling, trust, and understanding. As he observed her, he realized that she was preparing to depart. There was no urgency in her movements, no fear or alarm, only a subtle energy that spoke of purpose. The soft hum that had filled the air pulsed slightly faster, rhythmic and deliberate, as if signaling the end of this chapter of their encounter. Mark felt a pang of sadness, knowing that the extraordinary presence before him would soon vanish from his life. And yet, he also felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had experienced something no human could ever describe fully, a connection that transcended words, species, and even worlds. The alien woman raised her hand, and Mark instinctively mirrored the gesture. The glow of her skin intensified for a moment, radiating outward in gentle waves, and he felt a warmth in his chest, a direct emotional link, stronger than anything he had ever known. He sensed that she was communicating something important. Perhaps it was a farewell, perhaps a message of trust and respect. The patterns of light above her shimmered and spiraled in ways that seemed almost like a language, a visual message meant for him alone. Mark focused intently, feeling each shift, each pulse, as if he could understand their meaning directly through his heart. He tried to communicate back. Slowly, deliberately, he extended his hands and allowed himself to send a feeling of gratitude, wonder, and respect outward. He wanted her to know that he appreciated the moments they had shared, that he honored her presence and the trust she had shown in allowing him into her world. Almost immediately, the glow responded, softening and pulsating gently, a wave of acknowledgement that made Mark's heart swell. It was more than a response, it was a conversation of feelings, a silent confirmation that what they had shared was real, meaningful, and mutual. Mark noticed her eyes for the last time before her departure. They glimmered with extraordinary light, reflecting the stars above and the desert sands below. The intensity of her gaze conveyed emotions he could not fully name: appreciation, farewell, and perhaps a hint of curiosity about him, about humanity, and about the world she had visited. Her eyes seemed to speak directly to his soul, and for a moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, a bond that could not be broken by distance or time. He realized, with a mix of awe and humility, that this was not just a fleeting encounter. It was a meeting that had changed the very way he perceived life, communication, and the universe. Then, she moved, slowly, deliberately. She lifted from the desert floor, her body glowing with soft light. The air around her shimmered as if reality itself bent slightly to accommodate her presence. Mark watched in silent amazement as she floated upward, her movements graceful and fluid, a combination of elegance and power that seemed entirely natural. The soft hum she emitted rose slightly in pitch, a final melodic tone that reverberated through the desert, through the air, and into Mark's very being. He felt the vibration resonate in his chest, in his mind, and even in his soul. Mark instinctively raised his hands in farewell, mirroring the last gesture of connection they had shared. The glow around her expanded briefly, almost like a final embrace, before she began to move horizontally toward the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly before her, and the night sky, filled with countless stars, seemed to welcome her departure. Mark felt both a sense of longing and a deep peace. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment beyond explanation, but he also knew that it was meant to end in this way. Some experiences, he realized, were not meant to last forever. Their significance lay in the memory and the impact they left behind. As she rose higher, the colors around her shimmered and intertwined, forming patterns that seemed almost like a story being told just for him. Spirals of blue, silver, and soft violet danced in the air, moving with a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Mark watched intently, absorbing every nuance, feeling every emotion. In that moment, he understood that she was sharing a part of her world, her experience, and her perspective, leaving a lasting imprint on him. He felt gratitude swell within him, not just for the encounter, but for the universe that allowed him to witness something so rare, so profound, and so beautiful. Suddenly, a faint light appeared in the distance behind her. Mark realized it was a craft, smooth and metallic, glowing faintly under the stars. She approached it without hesitation, moving as if guided by some invisible tether. The craft was silent, almost imperceptible in the night air, but Mark could feel the energy it radiated. It seemed alive, like an extension of her being, and he understood that this was the way she would leave. His heart pounded with a mixture of awe and sadness. He wished he could know more, ask questions, or share this moment further, but he understood instinctively that some things were beyond human reach. Before she entered the craft, she paused once more, her glowing body casting soft light across the desert sands. She tilted her head toward Mark, and for a moment, their eyes met directly. In that gaze, Mark felt a final transmission of emotion, gratitude, farewell, and trust. It was as if she wanted him to know that the connection they shared would endure beyond time, space, and even understanding. Mark nodded, feeling tears well up in his eyes, not from fear or sadness, but from awe and reverence. He wanted to speak, to say something meaningful, but words felt small, inadequate. Instead, he simply held her gaze and let his emotions flow freely. Then, with a fluid motion, she entered the craft. The soft glow around her merged with the craft, and the entire structure seemed to come alive. The hum she had emitted blended with the energy of the vehicle, creating a harmonious resonance that echoed in the desert. Mark felt the vibration as if it were a physical presence, a final goodbye that reached deep into his soul. Slowly, the craft began to rise, hovering above the desert before accelerating silently toward the horizon. Mark followed it with his eyes until it vanished into the night sky, leaving only the stars and the desert behind. For several minutes, Mark stood silently, absorbing the enormity of what had just happened. He realized that he had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond imagination, something that would change him forever. He thought about the trust, the connection, and the shared understanding they had experienced. He thought about the power of simple gestures, like his compliment, and the way he had approached her with honesty and respect. He realized that even in a vast universe filled with mysteries, simple human actions could spark profound connections. Mark finally lowered his hands and sat down on a nearby rock, gazing at the stars. The desert around him was quiet, filled only with the soft whisper of wind through the sand. He reflected on the encounter, feeling a deep sense of peace and gratitude. He understood that some experiences could never be fully explained, never captured in words, and never shared entirely with others. Yet their significance was undeniable. He had been part of something miraculous, and that knowledge filled him with a quiet joy that would stay with him forever. As dawn began to break over the desert, the sky shifting from deep navy to soft pink and orange, Mark realized it was time to return to his life. But he knew he was not the same person who had arrived the night before. The encounter had expanded his understanding of the universe, of connection, and of life itself. He felt a newfound appreciation for the unknown, for curiosity, and for the ways in which beings of those from distant worlds could reach out and share. Understanding. Mark gathered his telescope, notebook, and camera, taking one last look at the desert where he had met her. He knew he would return to the city, resume his life, and yet carry this extraordinary memory with him always. He felt a quiet determination to observe, explore, and cherish the wonders of the universe, knowing that the unknown held not just mystery, but opportunity for connection, understanding, and awe. And so, as he drove away from the desert under the first light of morning, Mark Ramirez knew that he had been touched by something extraordinary. He had glimpsed a consciousness beyond human comprehension, shared an unspoken bond that transcended species and worlds, and learned that even the smallest gestures and words, curiosity, and kindness could create bridges between the most distant beings. It was a night he would never forget, a story he could hardly share fully, but one that would forever shape the way he saw the universe and his place within it.